The first thing I noticed was the smell, an earthy, damp scent that seeped into everything. Rain had been falling steadily for days, but when I stepped out of my apartment that morning, the drizzle had turned into a torrent. The sky was an angry shade of gray, and the streets were already shimmering with puddles. I pulled my hood tighter against the wind and hurried toward the subway station, hoping to avoid the worst of it. It didn't take long to realize that this was no ordinary storm. By the time I reached the corner of my block, water was pooling around my ankles. Cars sputtered and stalled in the middle of intersections, their hazard lights blinking like distress signals. People rushed past me, their umbrellas useless against the sideways rain. I clutched my bag tighter and quickened my pace, but a sinking feeling was already settling in my chest. Then came the sirens. A loud mechanical wail echoed through the city, followed by a garbled announcement. Flood warning. Seek higher ground immediately. My stomach dropped. Flooding? Here? In the city? I turned back toward my apartment, but the street I had just walked down was already submerged. The water was rising fast, swallowing curbs and creeping up storefronts. Panic surged through me as I realized I had no plan, no idea what to do. The subway was out of the question. It would be flooded by now. I needed to find higher ground, but where? Move! Get inside! Someone shouted, shoving past me. I stumbled but managed to regain my footing. The crowd was surging toward a nearby office building, its glass doors held open by a security guard waving people inside. I hesitated for a moment, then followed the flow. Inside, the lobby was chaos. People were soaked to the bone, their faces pale with fear. Someone's shoes squelched loudly against the marble floor, and a child was crying in the corner. The security guard locked the doors behind us, his radio crackling with frantic updates. The water's rising too fast. He said to no one in particular, "We've got to get to the upper floors." I joined the crowd pushing toward the stairwell, my heart pounding. My shoes slipped on the wet floor, and I grabbed the railing to steady myself. We climbed floor after floor, the air growing hotter and more humid with every step. By the time we reached the 5th floor, my legs were shaking and my lungs burned from exertion. The windows on this floor offered a clear view of the disaster unfolding outside. I pressed my face to the glass, my breath fogging up the pain. The street below was unrecognizable, transformed into a churning river of debris. Cars floated like toy boats, their headlights still glowing beneath the murky water. I spotted a man clinging to a lamppost, his face contorted with terror as the current threatened to drag him away. "Oh my God," someone whispered behind me. The reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a storm, it was a catastrophe. The building shuddered as a sudden gust of wind slammed against it, rattling the windows. A woman near me let out a yelp, clutching her child tightly. I backed away from the glass, my chest tight with fear. We weren't safe here. If the water kept rising, even the 5th floor wouldn't be enough. "We need to get to the roof," I said, my voice trembling. "The roof?" A man scoffed. "What good will that do? We'll be sitting ducks up there." "And we'll drown down here," I shot back. My tone surprised even me, but desperation was taking over. "At least on the roof, we'll have a chance to be rescued." There was a moment of silence as the group considered my words. Then, one by one, they began moving toward the stairwell again. I followed, my heart hammering in my chest. The climb to the roof felt endless. My legs ached and my lungs screamed for air, but I forced myself to keep going. The sound of rushing water grew louder with every step, a relentless reminder of what was at stake. By the time we reached the top, I was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. The roof was slick with rain, the wind howling like a living thing. I clung to the railing, squinting against the stinging droplets. From up here, the city looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Water stretched as far as the eye could see, turning streets into canals and neighborhoods into islands. Helicopters hovered in the distance, their searchlights sweeping over the flooded landscape. "Over here!" someone shouted, pointing toward a rescue boat making its way through the submerged streets. A wave of hope surged through me. If we could just get their attention, we might have a chance. We waved and shouted, our voices barely audible over the storm. Someone found a bright piece of fabric and tied it to the railing, letting it flap wildly in the wind. The boat seemed to notice, its searchlight sweeping over us before turning away. My heart sank as it continued down the street, oblivious to our cries. "They'll come back," a woman said, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The water continued to rise, inching closer to the roof's edge. My clothes were soaked through and the cold seeped into my bones. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to keep warm, but the fear and exhaustion were overwhelming. As night fell, the city was plunged into darkness. The power had gone out hours ago, and now even the faint glow of streetlights was gone. The only illumination came from the occasional lightning strike, casting eerie shadows over the flooded streets. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the chaos, but sleep was impossible. When dawn finally broke, the storm had begun to subside. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, and the wind had died down, but the devastation was clear. Entire blocks were underwater, and the once bustling city was eerily silent. Then, in the distance, I heard it, the low hum of an approaching helicopter. My heart leapt as I spotted it hovering over a nearby building, its rescue basket being lowered to a group of stranded people. Hope surged through me once again. "They're coming," someone shouted, and we all scrambled to wave and shout, doing everything we could to get the helicopter's attention. This time, it worked. The helicopter turned toward us, its spotlight sweeping over the roof. Relief washed over me as the rescue basket was lowered, and one by one, we were lifted to safety. As I sat in the helicopter, wrapped in a blanket and clutching a cup of warm tea, I looked down at the city below. The destruction was staggering, but so was the resilience of the people who had endured it. I thought about the strangers who had banded together on that roof, their determination and kindness in the face of disaster. And I thought about myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I had faced the rising water, the relentless storm, and the overwhelming fear. And I had survived. The flood had taken so much, but it had also given me something. A reminder of the power of hope, even in the darkest of times.